Typically, when you hear somebody talking about an awesome inline-six engine, they're talking about the Toyota 2JZ or the Nissan RB26, the Ford Barra, or even the BMW N54 and N55. While those engines are awesome, and we've made videos about all of them in the past, there is another really awesome inline-six engine that nobody really talks about, and that's the Jeep 4-liter. While the 4-liter might not have nearly as much performance potential as those other inline-six engines, it's arguably more reliable than all of them. Fair warning, this is one of my favorite engines ever, but I'll try and keep this video as unbiased as possible. Let's get into it. What's particularly interesting about the 4-liter is that it can trace its roots all the way back to 1964 with the AMC Rambler American, which was a small little compact car that featured a handful of different engines, one of them being a 232 cubic inch inline-six known as Typhoon 6. While the modern day 4-liter doesn't really share all that much stuff with those older engines, they share a lot of the same architect, and those older engines laid the groundwork that the 4-liter was built on. Throughout the years, AMC updated their inline-six engines with various different displacements and design features until 1986 when they launched the modern day 242 cubic inch 4-liter engine. During the development period of the 4-liter, AMC wasn't exactly thriving incredibly well, so to save development costs on the 4-liter, they used a lot of the same dimensions and architect features found on those older inline-six engines in the 232 and 258 cubic inch family. This is evident by the fact that 4-liter heads will pretty much just bolt onto a 232 or 258 cubic inch AMC inline-six. What's even more interesting is that according to AMC historian Frank Swigert, sorry if I butchered your name, it's totally possible and relatively common to put a 258 cubic inch crank and rods in a 4-liter to make a 280 cubic inch engine. This can be done with stock 258 cubic inch crank and rods and a 4-liter block and pistons. Before we get really too into it, I want to cover some really basic information for those of you who are completely new to this engine. As the name suggests, the 4-liter is a 4-liter inline-six. It features a cast iron block, cast iron head, 2 valves per cylinder, and it lacks any kind of variable valve timing or variable valve lift. Bore measures at 98.4 millimeters and stroke at 86.7 millimeters, which equates to 3,962 cc's of displacement, which is rounded up to 4 liters. Depending on the year of the engine, compression ratio can range from 8.8 to 1 up to 9.2 to 1. Now, something which is really interesting about this engine, which is way different than any other inline-six engine that we've featured on this channel, is that this engine does not use an overhead cam. What I mean by this is that there is not a camshaft on top of the cylinder head. Instead, the 4-liter uses a single cam in the block with hydraulic lifters, push rods, and roller rockers to operate the valve. Another thing which is way different than any other inline-six we've featured on this channel is the fact that the intake and exhaust ports are on the same side of the head. Now, typically air will enter in one side of the head and then exhaust will exit the other side of the head. With the Jeep 4-liter, air goes in one side and then exhaust exits out the exact same side, and the ports are alternating. As you can probably imagine, putting intake ports and exhaust ports directly next to each other on a cylinder head is not particularly thermally efficient, which is probably why you don't see this design on modern engines. Again, this is way different than any other modern inline-six engine where you're typically going to find 1 or 2 camshafts on top of the head, as well as intake and exhaust ports, which are opposite of each other. This again just shows how old the Jeep 4-liter really is and how old those internal design features are. Now, something else which you might find really interesting is that you might have noticed that the bore and stroke are actually kind of weird for a truck or SUV engine. Typically, you'll find a longer stroke than bore, or maybe even just a square stroke in bore. But on the Jeep 4-liter, bore is actually significantly larger than stroke. Typically, a larger stroke is going to give you more torque, but in this case, a large bore actually doesn't really mean that it has no torque. In fact, the 4-liter is a really torquey engine, even with that short stroke. When the 4-liter appeared on the scene in 1987, it was surprisingly powerful for an engine of that size to be used in an SUV or truck. Upon initial release, it output 173 horsepower and 215 pound-feet of torque, which was quite a bit more than other inline-six engines found in Ford, GM, or Nissan trucks or SUVs. Throughout the years, Jeep increased power output until the final high-output version, which output a whopping 190 horsepower and 235 pound-feet of torque. Ironically, the 4-liter was actually pretty impressive upon its initial release in 1987, but power really didn't actually increase all that much until it died in 2006. Something which a lot of truck or SUV engines of the time did not feature was a quality fuel injection system. A lot of truck and SUV engines at that time were carbureted or used throttle body injection, but AMC decided to go ahead and send the 4-liter over to RENAULT-BENDIX for the fuel management and engine management system. This engine management system later became known as the RENIX system. It's important to note that the carbureted 258 cubic inch engine was produced alongside the 4-liter, with the carbureted engine being used in the YJ Wrangler from 1987 to 1990 until the YJ eventually used the 4-liter. The RENIX system was very advanced when it first came out, and Jeep had a distinct advantage over other SUV or truck manufacturers with that system. But since then, the RENIX system has become known as an overly complicated and really difficult to work with system because it really doesn't diagnose very easily. What I mean by this is that there's pretty much no tools that connect to the RENIX system, and it doesn't store codes, which means if you have an intermittent issue, there's literally no way of knowing what the issue is. Luckily, when Chrysler purchased AMC in 1987, they recognized that the RENIX system was kind of garbage, and by 1991, they had created their own system. Aside from changing the engine management system in 1991, Chrysler also changed the location of the intake ports to help increase flow, added a larger throttle body, improved intake and exhaust manifolds, and changed the camshaft. The result of all the changes in 1991 was a power increase to 190 horsepower and 225 pound-feet. These engines are now known as the high output engines, with many of the Jeeps using the 1991 and later engines having a high output badge on the side of them. From 1991 to 1995, there were pretty much no major changes to the 4-liter, but in 1995, the cylinder head got a few small updates, and then in 1996, the engine block was upgraded with more webbing and a stud girdle for added rigidity. In 2000, there were some changes in the cylinder head, which kind of had a bad design and led to cracking in the head. Not all of the 2000 and later cylinder heads have this head cracking issue. It's just the heads with the casting 0331 on the side of them. The design of these heads really isn't bad, but they were cast a little bit too thin, and you'll often see cracking in between cylinders number 3 and 4. With that cracking, oil and coolant mix, and your head basically needs to be replaced because it's junk. Now, about midway through 2001, Chrysler had fixed this issue by casting their cylinder heads a little bit thicker while still using the same design, which fixed this cracking issue. Throughout the years, Jeep and Chrysler made some other small changes to the 4-liter, but for the most part, it stayed pretty much the same. Now, what's particularly interesting is how closely related the 4-liter inline 6 and the 2.5-liter inline 4 are. Really, the 4-liter and the 2.5 have the same exact architecture, and they have pretty much the same design. As a matter of fact, if you were to just take a 4-liter engine and remove cylinders 3 and 4, you would pretty much end up with exactly a 2.5-liter inline 4-cylinder. Looking at some of the common problems you'll find on a 4-liter, there really surprisingly aren't that many issues with the 4-liter. As mentioned earlier, the RENIX 4-liters are very hard to diagnose. The later engines have leaky fuel injectors, supposedly. The rear main seals can be leaky, as can the oil filter adapter seals. The 0331 cylinder heads can crack, and oil pumps are known to occasionally wear out prematurely. That's pretty much it for all the common issues. This motor really has very few common issues, and that's mostly for the fact that it is incredibly simple. It's based on an engine all the way from the 1960s, and it has pretty much no advanced features. It has no variable valve timing. It has no variable valve lift. It has pretty much nothing advanced about it at all. Because of the lack of advanced features, there's very few things that can really break on a 4-liter, and these engines are well known for surviving in conditions that would definitely destroy any other engine. Now, just in my personal experience, I've had 4-liter engines run on 5 cylinders for extended periods of time just fine. I've had them run on close to no oil just fine. I've had them run way below operating temperature due to a lack of a thermostat just fine. There was even a point where I accidentally put a hole and dented my oil pan, and the crankshaft was hitting the oil pan. I was able to get it all the way home, remove the oil pan, undent it, and weld it back together, and that motor ran just fine. And I know that these points that I just made are anecdotal, but in my personal experience, these engines are absolutely bulletproof, and destroying one of them is basically impossible. As far as performance goes, it's kind of obvious that the 4-liter was not designed with performance in mind. It has basically no performance features, and getting more power out of one is a little bit difficult, although it's not impossible. One of the more popular builds that you'll see is a 4.7-liter stroker, which will increase power to about 210 to 220 horsepower and upwards of 300 pound-feet of torque, but that's about as much performance as you're going to get out of a 4-liter naturally aspirated. Now, there are quite a few people who have been turbocharging these engines, which is actually really interesting because these motors sound really, really wild when they're turbocharged. There are also some supercharger kits on the market, but again, they really don't increase power all that much. The most you're really going to see out of a 4-liter with forced induction is 250, maybe 260 horsepower. They're really not a performance-oriented motor, and you shouldn't expect to get a lot of power out of one. So that's pretty much everything you need to know about the Jeep 4-liter. I tried to keep this video as unbiased as possible, but I won't lie, this is one of my favorite engines ever for the sole fact that they are pretty much unbreakable and super reliable, and I've had a lot of hands-on experience with these engines. The reason I love these motors is the same reason that a lot of other people love these motors, which is they're super reliable. They're nearly unbreakable. If there's anything you guys want to add or anything you think that I missed, please let me know down in the comments below. Sometimes I will miss something important when I'm researching this, so if there's anything that I missed, please let me know down below. While you're down there, be sure to hit the thumbs up button. It really helps out the channel. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on future videos, and let me know what videos you want to see in the future, and I'll see you guys in the next one.